Welcome to Green Building Matters, the podcast that matters for green building professionals. Learn insight in green buildings as we interview today's experts in LEED and WELL. We'll learn from their career paths, war stories, and all things green, because green building matters. And now our host, and yes, he has every LEED and WELL credential. Here's Charlie Cicchetti.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. I am having a blast doing interviews with some sustainability-minded professionals, not just on the new construction, architecture, contractor side, but on the facility and property management side too. And that's who we have with us today is Mike Bean out of Cleveland, Ohio. Mike and I have shared notes on how to pass certain LEED exams and what's going on with sustainability. And I'm just really excited about the conversation we're going to get into with Mike. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You know, you and I have talked, the facility management side, the property management side, that's a different animal. I think I shared with you, I used to work for Opus a long time ago, and, they would build buildings, but they also had the property management team. And I've always been fascinated by running existing commercial buildings. And I actually spend a good amount of time these days greening up existing buildings. So let's take us back, though, Mike. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And then we're going to talk a little bit later about how you, as a property manager, also have a lot of good, building, I would say, engineering side of it. So as I've gotten to know you, I think you've got a good hybrid of both of those. So I'm excited to have that chat. Hey, Mike, take us back. Where'd you grow up? Was it there just outside of Cleveland, right? And where'd you go to school?
Yes, I grew up right outside of Cleveland. I grew up in Berea, Ohio, which is probably about 10, 15 miles outside of the city of Cleveland. And I went to Berea High School. I graduated back in '82.
Nice. And we were chatting a little bit about sometimes where do we get our start? Some of those early jobs. Maybe that gives us a peek at a future career. But you had a little experience early on the HVAC side. Is that right?
That's right. I went to Westside Institute, which was a local trade school, and I went for HVAC steam plant operations, and a really great experience.
No, that's fantastic. And then you got into property management. Did you have to make a decision? Do you want to go more the building engineer route or property manager route? Educate me on that and those listening, because I don't know. I mean, do you, in the construction field, for example, I think you kind of make a decision. Do you want to be a field superintendent and be out there on the projects? Do you want to be project manager? Sometimes out of a job trailer, but a lot of times in the office or the headquarters. So is it important to kind of choose a path or not necessarily from your experience?
Well, from my experience, I started at the bottom. I started out as a building mechanic and slowly progressed my way upwards. I started out working in a hospital, which gave me actually a wealth of knowledge with building systems as far as chillers and boilers and exposure to bigger equipment. And then I made a jump over to property management, where I was actually looking at smaller package rooftop units. I've always been kind of in the HVAC field, less in the property management end. That came later on when I started managing about 200,000 square feet, which gave me great exposure. It was actually two separate building types conjoined together to make that 200,000 square feet. So it was a whole different animal in itself. And I spent about 10 years there.
Oh, wow.
At that point, that kind of morphed into more of the property manager role, where you couldn't do everything yourself. And
right.
It was good to know the mechanics of the building, but then you ended up knowing the accounting end of the building. That progressed to tenant relations and making big capital decisions.
That's a great takeaway from your story already, Mike, is just you get exposed to multiple building types and multiple building systems. I mean, we don't want to be just all one type of, say, Class A office with the same systems. You got some good experience early, had to figure that out. Some of us, the degrees we choose in school we use, and some of them the degrees we choose we don't. But I'd have to guess with your 2 degrees, one in building engineering and one in architectural construction engineering, you must have used that in your career and probably still using a little of that today. Did that help?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, when I took on the job of the 200,000 square feet, I was actually going to school at night for the architectural construction engineering. I was actually able to leave school and then the next day I apply what I've learned, which, that helped me immensely as far as learning building systems and how things are put together and how they all work together. It was an invaluable experience.
Oh man, that's great. I always like to ask the question: when did you really first become sustainability minded? So, because now, you're kind of all in on this. You've got a lead AP O+M. You're an RPA, which is a BOMA credential, and you went on to take the BOMA HP, the high performance add-on. So, as I've gotten to know you, I've seen you're all in. But take us back to when did you first become more sustainability minded?
Well, this has gone on over time. I've always been kind of sensitive to environmental issues, and I've done volunteering in the past with the local park here, and so I've always been kind of on the awareness level that sometimes these issues morph into bigger problems. What really got me into sustainability, though, is like energy engineering. When I started looking at what I could do as far as reducing the energy use, that kind of helps in the bigger picture of carbon reduction and things like that. Back in, I would say, I was looking at USGBC probably over 10 years ago. And at the time when I first started looking at it,
Nice.
only architects and engineers could actually take the test. So what I did is I took other classes that were environmentally related and kind of kept myself abreast of what was happening over time. That really helped out quite a bit.
Yeah, no, and I think even some more personal stories there with plastic and just waste and the fact that you really like the parks and hiking. You share with me some stories there, just how a simple thing as far as just refusing plastic bags. At GBS in April, we really celebrated Earth Month, since earthday.org was really like refuse the plastic straws. I mean, we have to carry on those conversations in our circle of influences. It's okay to refuse on the plastic side, but on the building side and just energy savings, Mike, I know we'll get into it a little bit, but energy savings is where you can really prove there's a business case for sustainability. There's other places that there's paybacks, but energy savings, say on a lead project, that's going to be the biggest ROI. So I'm glad you got in on that early. Kind of a follow-up to that, though, is you're real active with BOMA. Can you tell us a little bit about the BOMA BEEP program?
That was a program that was put out probably 10 years ago, but it's still around today. And basically, it gave you sustainability. What's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like awareness classes. And
sure,
I think originally what they wanted to do is kind of be in the green associate level. And that's where actually I learned a lot previous to taking my green associate test. I actually learned from the BOMA BEEP program.
Makes sense. No, it's that awareness. That's a good word. It's like, okay, here's some things you could be doing, should be doing on your projects. Here's what's happening in industry. So maybe that was a good program that BOMA still does. For those that don't know, BOMA is a trade organization, Building Owners and Managers Association. A lot of property managers, building engineers, and especially some office building owners. Great organization we've partnered with there. Well, let's talk about mentors. Mike, you've had a great career here, and you're running some facilities there in the Cleveland area for your owner-occupied properties there for the bank. But take us back. Did you have some mentors that really invested some time into you?
Oh, yes. Early on in my career, it was pretty much when you came into work, you did your job, and then you went home. It was a lot of HVAC work and so you end up working by yourself. But the more I got involved with property management, the more I met different people along my way. And the property I was at for quite a while. And the ownership had actually really good philosophical views of ethics and how to conduct yourself at work, and what they were looking for as a property. And they really cared about the tenants, which is, that was fantastic. That's really what you want when you work for a property management company. But what was going on is the property was going into receivership, and I met a man named Frank Bashir. And Frank was a property manager / division manager for the company that we worked for in the past. And he decided to take me under his wing. And once the property sold and came out of receivership, sold, he invited me to come work for him at the company he was working for. And I actually followed Frank for 2 separate companies. And basically, he's the one that pushed me along to go into BOMA, attain my RPA, and, kind of keep my eyes open to different things. And I have to credit him with quite a bit. And then once we started working for this newer company, I met a man named Michael Smithing with Colliers International. And Colliers was offering up a Green Associate program. So you could go in, I think it was 6 sessions long. And he was working out of the Singapore office. And it's the way he taught and the way he spoke and the passion that he had for sustainability really brought me on board. And I have to give him most of the credit for the reason I started pursuing more and more sustainable practices and going after my lead GA and then eventually my OM.
Wow.
He definitely was a strong influence. He probably doesn't even realize that, but we had a couple of conversations in between. I credit him with passing my Green Associate. I let him know that I passed my Green Associate. Let him know I was thinking about pursuing my O&M. And he was actually considering that himself and asked me how it went. And after I passed the test, I sent him an email, even though I was no longer working for that company. And he was happy to hear from it. But his piece of advice was, now go do something with it. So I feel like I'm mandated now to actually pursue more sustainable practices.
I love that story. And for those listening, I mean, it's so important that if someone had that good positive influence on you to close the feedback loop and let them know that really meant a lot. Here's an update. Here's what you're doing with it now. But maybe be prepared for the next challenge. I love it. That's good stuff. Yeah, let's talk about the exams for a little bit, because that's how, Mike, you and I got to know each other. And, you're a fan of education here. You've passed, a few of the lead exams. Lead AP O+M. There's only 3,000 people in the world that hold that specialty credential. So that's awesome that you have the O+M. What is it about the lead exams for you? Do they come more easily because you know the building terminology? You've you made a career out of buildings, or are they pretty tricky? And what's your secret to success on passing some of these exams?
Oh boy, I think my background does play a small part in passing like the lead O&M for existing buildings, mostly because the buildings that I've actually taken on are all existing. So once you know the terminology and know what to look for, and you have a good solid basis of how building systems actually work, it does give you a slight edge. But the educational material was phenomenal. That was a huge help in passing the test. My way of studying is I read the whole entire O&M book, and then I went back and highlighted, took test after test, practice test after practice test after practice test, kind of keep me in that rhythm. And the test is tricky. I don't think I would have passed if it wasn't for the GBS, material and the USGBC material. I definitely would have floundered a bit.
Well, thanks for that plug. And I mean, that's what we do. We really love to hear from people like you that are just, going after it. And then you pass the exam and you let us know you passed. And so, we were talking about some of your proudest achievements to date, and you kind of highlighted that it was going after your BOMA RPA, the Green Associate, the Lead AP O+M, and then the BOMA, the new add-on high performance credential. So you did all that in pretty short order, right? So you're all in, and that's a lot of college coursework right there when you pack them close together. So I love that. That's what you say is one of your proudest achievements. So tell us a little more about that, because I think, Mike, sometimes as busy professionals, we don't make the time to learn, to read, to listen, to maybe make those a priority on our goals for the year, is to go after these credentials or stay current with them. So why is it such a big deal for you? What does that give you?
Well, when I decided to go into this end of the field, and it started actually to ignite quite a bit. You started seeing, you'd read about sustainable practices, you'd start seeing them in play. I put in my mind where I'm a big fan of goal setting. You write the goal, you attack the goal, and then you smash the goal, and you get it done. I do 1, 3, and 5 year goals, and I set a 10-year goal. That's how I pursue things. And I think once you write it down and you make a commitment, which I have towards sustainability, I go full in. So what I would do is I would study for the GA, and then I tried to find examples out there. So I've made trips to Pittsburgh. They have a huge sustainability initiative going on there. And then I got involved with some people from Balma who were actually involved in some sustainable initiatives. And the more I got involved with those people, I learned about Cleveland 2030 and the 2030 districts, and realized that they're all over the country. But I think in order for you to be successful, you have to carve out the time, you have to study for it, and then you have to be aware of who else is involved. And once you find those people who are involved, it kind of keeps that fire going, and you keep wanting to do more. We're only here for a short amount of time. I think the best thing you do is utilize that time to leave the place better than what you came into. And I think that's my driving force.
Dude, I love it. Fire, right? I mean, we all know what gets us excited, and hopefully this is something we'll get some others excited. And I know you're pursuing the well AP, so I'll give you some super secret tips on that. But you got it, and can't wait for you to have some more letters after your name, man. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Let's fast forward to almost pretty much current day, right? You've managed a lot of properties in the Cleveland area, and now you work for an owner occupied property. Essentially, you're on the facility management side. But what's keeping you busy today? You got any projects going on? I know I've talked benchmarking, and you are definitely an energy saving ninja, always thinking of where can we save more energy and have a higher performing building. So tell us a little bit about what's going on today, Mike.
Well, the company I work for right now they've done things a certain way for a long period of time. And you have to go in there understanding that. So it's almost like you're spoon feeding knowledge and trying to help them go in the right path. So what I've done is, I've introduced some pretty extensive. Well, first off, I start benchmarking all their own properties. And that's a good level of awareness. You have a good starting place, so you know where you're at, and you can actually trace your own goals based on that benchmarking. The things that you do will show up. So I've implemented some LED project lighting. We have some older switchgear for motors that we're going to convert to variable frequency drives, which that in itself is a big cost savings. We're updating the building automation system, which helps you manage that on-time, off-time scheduling, and that is a huge help. HVAC, lighting, your big cost centers, that's where your cost savings is going to come from, and that's mostly what I look at. I do look, other things the lead has taught me with the parking lots and how we can use sustainable techniques. Everything I do now, I look at things in a way where, can I put in a sustainable practice? Can I use that best practice to improve the conditions of the site, their energy savings, and better for the people who come into work every day? And that's my goal. I've set up a full recycling program that is ready for them whenever they want to insert it. There's a lot of things here that they do right. They use FSC paper. It's all this awareness of, and fortunately, taking these classes and getting these accreditations makes you aware of all these different avenues that you can look to apply in your everyday work day.
Right. No, I think, so many nuggets in there. For what I took away the most is there's so much we can do with sustainability, and you have to just continue to, bring up the most practical projects that probably still have a good business case, because someone may need to approve them if dollars have to be budgeted for up front, and then what's the payback. And that happens a lot here in the existing building, the property management, facility management world. So you got to continue to tee up projects and see if those stakeholders can be convinced, let's spend the money here. Here's the ROI. Sure, we go after the low hanging fruit first. And I think the energy savings, Like there's so many buildings I walk into that just are wasting energy still. You'd think that
Right.
that would be less of the case, but it's just not. Maybe some more of our Class A office and stuff like that a little better, but you'd be surprised because you hit on it. Sometimes we're stuck in our old ways. Why do we turn on the equipment at this time and off at this time instead of an optimum start stop instead of getting some
Right.
better equipment? So it's okay to ask questions and challenge. Hey, why do we still do it that way? And maybe the answer is here's why, and it's still relevant to today's best use of that building or that system, but it's okay to still ask the question, is that still the best way to do it? And so, the recycling, the Energy Star, the benchmarking, that was the other takeaway is benchmarking. I mean, for all those listening is, you've got to see where you're at and set some goals and where could we go. If you don't know where you're at compared to your other buildings, or you don't know where you're at compared to, say, like Energy Star, benchmarks you against other, say, office buildings, it's very difficult to see, are we as good as we think we are? And so I'm a fan of Energy Star, and Mike, happy to hear, you're benchmarking a lot there, a lot of your properties. Any tips though, Mike, on, you've dealt with different types of owners over your career in real estate. Some might be more proactive when it comes to sustainability and LEED and energy saving projects than others. They might be coming to you saying, Mike, what else can we put in the capital plan? But any tips on maybe how to get some projects approved? I mean, is it always about the dollars and cents? And sometimes maybe it is about the dollars and cents. But what have you found?
I found mostly that, if you prove your ROI and your simple payback is the easiest way most people understand. ROI tends to you lose part of your audience if they're not familiar with it. But simple payback financially, I always go into a project with my simple paybacks, my ROI, so I have it there. And then we look at, what's good for the employees. What's this going to do for you? Is this going to drop your energy costs? These are the important things. A lot of times with ownerships, it does come to dollars and cents. Does this make sense? What's their hold? Are they a long-term holder? Are they a owner occupied? Every ownership's a little bit different, but that's the proving points. When you have your ROI and you have your simple payback, and then a lot of times, it comes to aesthetics that wins out over mechanical. The saying in real estate is, anything above the ceiling is tough to sell. And that's true. So what you do is you just use your best case argument with ROI and simple payback. Moving from there, we have a good health oriented team here. And, that's also another thing that I use as a selling point to pull in some of my sustainable efforts. And that's about where we go with that.
Gotcha. No, and some of what you just said was kind of the triple bottom line, but in a certain order. When it comes to, commercial real estate, it's got to make the good business case first, but then it's our job to bring up the other parts of, the people, the health side of it. And there's some mandates around carbon these days, et cetera, et cetera. So thanks for those pro tips, Mike, on getting our projects approved. Let's look into the crystal ball. This is a question I love to ask here on the Green Building Matters podcast, but where do you think sustainability and green buildings are going to be shifting next?
I think resiliency is going to be our next big, thing to look at. We're getting some mandatory rules that are being incorporated already, but if you look at resiliency first, and then I see passive design as well as well building. I think well building is when you combine all three of these, resiliency, passive design, and well building standards, you have the trifecta of everything that you need. We have a climate change issue that's going on right now. That's where the resiliency comes in. And also we have an aging infrastructure, electrical infrastructure here that we have to keep in consideration at all time. And I see more ownerships and more people who own buildings looking to within, like to improve their use of power, but also to look into renewable power and microgrids and things on site, so they're less dependent on the outside, if that makes sense.
Definitely, no.
And
you have options.
And
options open. Sorry.
Right. No, I'm sorry. And as you see with renewable energy, they're coming along leaps and bounds. We have storage capacities that have improved, but they're talking within the next 5 years of a great improvement on storage capacities. And we already know that renewable energy is actually healthier for people. That's a big thing. The coal-fired power plants are like becoming a thing of the past for a reason. They're damaging. There's byproduct there that's not good. But we do know that wherever we have renewable energy, the byproduct is a healthier environment. So it's like the triple bottom line in a bigger scope.
No, you're right. And there's change happening. There's change out there. So the more independent, and we're not doing it for political reasons or anything like that. We're doing it for just, so we can operate a little more independently, and we have options. We're not forced into, having a chance at losing power or paying outrageous pricing on power and so forth on down the line. But resiliency, it's interesting because that keeps coming up in conversation, but I like where you went with it, and I don't think I've heard that yet for those that have mentioned resiliency. So thanks for making sure we're out in front of that one, Mike. All right, now let's just talk about a little more about you and what do you think your gift is? What's your specialty?
Well, when it comes to work, I think the idea that I know systems well, and I think that's paid off for me. But I think another part of my personality is, like, at least I like to think so, is I'm a little bit more flexible than most people. I like to listen to other people's opinions and how they would handle things, and that's how I've done this my entire career. I just try to be as flexible as I possibly can so I can understand more. And I think once you kind of close your mind off, you lose that ability to make decisions. Change is always constant, and if you don't learn to be flexible, that you'll get left behind, or that change will definitely do you no good in the future.
No, it's interesting. I work with a lot of engineers, and I went to Georgia Tech, and I think maybe some of the engineering mindset that want to figure out how things work is, I think they hope that it works the way they want it to, or they think it is, but maybe you're a little more open-minded and a little more flexible. It doesn't have to work the way they wanted it to. There could be a different way to get there. So that's pretty cool, man. Just understand how things work, but have some flexibility there, points of view. Mike, do you have any routines, rituals? What helps you stay on point? What's helped you be successful? You mentioned goal setting.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of goal setting. Ever since I've been goal setting, I've had my most success. I think it tends to help you focus on the task at hand, and yet it also gives you a doorway to the future. And I'm a huge fan of goal setting. Like I said before, I usually do a 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and then there's a 10-year goal. There's always a 10-year goal, but that one's a little bit less important than the 1 and the 3.
Gotcha.
So that's.
Sorry, go ahead. Now, how often do you check in on those goals? So teach us a little something here. Do you do a big planning, and then how often are you checking in on those goals?
Well, I'm a monthly guy. I look at where I've been in the past month and see how far I'm ahead or if I'm behind. And I think that's really important that you stay on top of it. I think that's the only reason why I was able to get the GA and the OM and the RPA and the HP is because I pursued and checked. It's like keeping yourself in check all the time.
Okay. And, we're told to make SMART goals, right? Specific and measurable,
right?
Realistic and time bound. So, you've done a good job with that. Any goal setting tools, planners, or even authors you'd recommend, or have you kind of come up with your own goal setting program?
I kind of done what works for me.
Okay.
That's basically how I am. But I do write. I have to say, I schedule everything. I write everything down. I have like a notebook planner that I keep notes in. That's usually what I use. My bigger goal setting is, a regular handwritten. I follow the old school. If you write it down, you'll do it type of thing.
Sure.
And I use my calendar for work for everything.
Well, they say what doesn't get scheduled doesn't get done, and it's one of those that even if you're a fly by the seat of the pants person, you're going to spend some mental energy on thinking of what should you be working on next, what's a priority. So if you could batch that, be a good planner and scheduler, then you can just pick up and that thing you're going to be doing in that order. You've already spent some energy to put it in the right order. So, Mike, good stuff. So let's keep going here. Let's talk about bucket list. I'm a fan of the bucket list. Sometimes there's some adventure, some travel. I've got some crazy ones on my bucket list, but tell us, what are a couple things on your bucket list?
Well, yeah, now my bucket list is like my daughter just graduated from college last weekend.
Oh, congrats.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. And my son has 2 years left. So my bucket list has become a lot more fun. And a couple things I have is like, I'm going to go to Samoa, the American Samoa. I've been obsessed with it. I have to do it. It's just one of those things. And Costa Rica would be right up there with Samoa. It's just, I hike, I bike, I kayak, I do a lot of things outside. And I think those two areas would probably offer me a little bit of everything. And, it's the tropics and it's warm up in Cleveland. It's not always warm in Cleveland. Let me tell you.
Yeah, well, first, congrats on the graduation. My boys are 9, 6, and 4, so I've got a little ways to go. But gosh, I can only imagine you've got to be a proud dad. And on the bucket list, I got to admit, I thought I was pretty good at geography. I did have to Google map where the American Samoa is. So what? South Pacific, just near Fiji. Is that right? It looks gorgeous.
That's right. That's right. It just looks phenomenal to me. I think I have to do it.
You got to do it, man. So put it on the plan and it's come together. Costa Rica. I was fortunate to go to Costa Rica a couple of years ago. My wife and I celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary, and we did go down to Costa Rica. Talk about sustainability just being kind of baked into, where you stay and the whole ecotourism. It's really special to see throughout Costa Rica.
And honestly, that's one of the things that really attracted me most to both of those areas. Their diversity and their sustainability programs and how their awareness of climate change and things that are happening to them directly, yet they make the effort to do things that you could actually take with you the rest of your life.
Yeah, I love it. And you remember those trips. Well, keep me posted on 2 great travel trips there. Thanks for sharing. A couple more questions here. Books. Is there a book you'd recommend? Maybe it'd make a good gift. What's top of mind there?
Oh, well, I've been immersed in all the BOMA, USGBC, and GBES material for the last few years.
All right.
Like buried in it. Before that, I used to read a lot of cookbooks. I love food.
Nice.
Who doesn't? But then also, I read a couple books a couple of years back, and No Shortcuts to the Top by Ed Vestures was one of my favorites that really got my attention. He's a mountain climber, and great book. Kind of gives you the whole, if you pursue something, you can attain it, mentality. I just loved reading it. And then I also was into like survival books for a while, and there's a book called Deep Survival by Lawrence Gonzalez. It's kind of like went through different scenarios and how things happen in the wilderness, and it was a great read. It was just something that I really enjoyed reading, and you take lessons from it, life lessons from it, and you kind of apply it to your own.
Oh, those are 2 great books. I haven't read yet. I'm going to, and we're going to put the links to these books that Mike's mentioned. It's funny you mentioned cookbooks too, because I think especially these days, I think cookbooks can tell the story of the cook or the chef. They can talk about the techniques, right, and maybe the origin, and then sure you get into some recipes. So there actually is some good meat, pun intended there, in the book. So Mike, I love that, but I really think we're going to link to these other books and make sure some others have a chance to pick up a copy or listen to them maybe on Audible. So, Mike, in closing, let's talk about some advice you'd give to someone that's maybe jumping into this green building career. You've mentioned you've had a great career in real estate there in the Cleveland area, and you've always been sustainably minded, energy savings minded, high performance. But of late, you've gone all in, it seems, and you're picking up the credentials left and right. You're really, it's more and more part of your conversation. You're thinking ahead about resiliency. So I love to see that you're all in. But what advice would you have to someone career-wise?
I would say start your education early. And once you start it, don't stop learning. You kind of have to pursue things, and you have to learn more, and you have to apply. You just can't become stagnant. I wish somebody would have said something to me early on. I would have probably been more directed at that time, but I'm making a comeback now.
Gotcha. Start early, never stop. Yeah. What else?
Yeah, because, my passion for sustainability started late in my career. If you really think about it, and if you learn anything from our interview now, things can evolve late, and but they change throughout your life. And I think it's never too late to pursue something new. I feel re-energized by getting into sustainability, even in my everyday life and my job right now.
And that's great. It's come up a couple of times about fire, a little passion in your career, and even if you've been at the same place for a long time, there's ways that you can still bring some fire in, and I love it. Mike, you wanted to share a quote here as we wrap up, but I really have had a lot of fun chatting. So how would you sum up what we talked about today?
Through the quote?
Yeah.
Well, I've always believed that when you have a voice, you have an obligation to use that voice to empower others. That's by Diane von Furstenberg.
Cool.
I think it's important, especially in nowadays, that if you see something, if you know something, share that knowledge, share that time, share that investment that you've made in yourself with other people. If it wasn't for the fact Michael Smithing, did such a powerhouse job of, teaching that lead GA, I probably would have, floundered a while for quite a while. But, you gotta, if you have that voice, be that voice, and, don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I don't know if you've heard, but this is new, where for all of our podcast guests, we had some really cool t-shirts. They're pretty high quality, made up, and they say, teach everything you know. And then on the back's our Green Building Matters podcast logo. And since you've been a guest here, I'm going to get you a shirt. And I think we're talking the same language. For those listening, it might sound cliche is learn and teach, but it's just like, you have to. You just have to. And so let's make sure we're teaching everything we know. But as Mike's challenged us is, never stop learning. So, Mike, I just want to say thank you. And I mean it when I say you're a gentleman and a scholar. Gentleman, because you've always encouraged me in the short time we've known each other, and the good work we're doing at GBS. And scholar, man, you're going after every credential that's out there, and you're like, what else can I learn? So, Mike, thanks for being on.
Trying to keep up with you, Charlie.
I love it, man. You're almost there. But no, seriously, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed myself.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode, and you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.